record, recording this to the cloud. Week 11, R795, may the ghosts and all the demons who are out there to interfere with your dissertation go away. We will exercise those demons tonight because we have two speakers coming to us, and I will also talk about best practices. And before Chaoran starts, I'll just say I've been remiss in not sharing a couple books I've had sitting next to me on my desk for the last 11 weeks. We've got one book I'll recommend here. It's called The Craft of Research. The Craft of Research, 4th edition by Wayne Booth and about 4 other authors, B-O-O-T-H. 700,000 copies sold. You probably could find a cheap one on Amazon. You might want to get version 2 or version 3 really cheaply. Don't buy the new one, although I'm sure they've updated it significantly. Let's see what chapters are in here. Making claims, assembling evidence and reasons, acknowledgments, engaging sources, from problems to sources, from questions to problems. I'm going in reverse. Becoming a competent researcher, which we all want to be, asking questions and finding answers. This sounds like a very palatable book. Nothing that's going to cause too much stress and anxiety skimming through. From what I've read, it's just matter of fact kind of language in here. But maybe the current one has more related to technology-based research and evaluation tools. And if that's what you're looking for, one of my former students has a book. Her name is, well, it's actually current Professor Jessica Lester with my former student, Trina Paulus, who was Jessica's student at, I believe, or vice versa. Jessica was Trina's student. So Jessica Lester teaches in inquiry at IU now, but she was trained at Tennessee by Trina Paulus. Trina's great, and Trina's got this book on digital tools for qualitative research. So you might take a look at that. And she was a colleague of your advisor, Karen, when she was in school here. So Trina Paulus, you might impress her by buying this book and showing your advisor. I've got Trina's book because they were friends, I believe. So another book, and I probably should read a couple of the things in the table of contents in here. Why digital tools, engaging in reflective practices and making ethical choices, that's important. Reviewing the literature, managing projects, generating data, transcribing audio and video, analyzing text data. And I have decided a couple of weeks ago that I'm going to try and bring Trina Paulus next semester into this class next semester. You see, I can come back and hear from Trina. She packs them in when she does workshops because everyone wants to learn about these digital tools for qualitative research. So when this book came out, she was an associate professor in the University of Georgia, said, we'll hire you and make you a full professor. That's how popular she was because of this one book. Okay. So it is like gravy. Now she moved back to Tennessee to a small college due to family, but she's a really smart person, and I highly recommend her book. She's got a newer book on analyzing discourse, online discourse, with another former student in IST. Her name's Alyssa Wise, Paulus and Wise. I think that book is Routledge. This book is Sage, The Craft of Research book. Let's see who the big publisher is on this one. Does it have a publisher? It doesn't. I'm sure it does. It doesn't come out, stick out. What? Oh, University of Chicago Press. Reputable, quite reputable. So anyways, I might try and bring in Alyssa and Trina, and maybe Jessica Lester too next semester. Then there's one, Conducting Qualitative Research of Learning in Online Spaces. Conducting Qualitative Research of Learning in Online Spaces by Hannah Gerber and her colleagues, Gerber. And this is published by Sage. So Sage dominates in this space. And that's why when Florence Martin presented 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, her book that she's going to do on systematic reviews of the research will be published by Sage. Routledge wanted to give her a contract. I connected her to both. I recommended Sage. She got one with Sage. In this book, they have chapters on of course, what the title is about: how can learning in online spaces be informed by qualitative research? What kind of online spaces exist? So my other class, we had a session on online spaces a few weeks ago. What methodological tools are available for data collection? What is ethical research? How might research change in new times? So this book it's 2017, and the Trina's book is, I think, around the same time or a little before that, 2014. Okay. And the last one I want to share with you is called How to Do Your Research Project, a guide for students, the 3rd edition. Okay. How to Do Your Research Project, step by step, by Gary Thomas, just the way it sounds, Gary Thomas, another Sage book. So just go to the Sage website and just browse and pick up a couple of books, or better yet, browse, find some titles, go to Amazon and find the used version and buy the used version a lot cheaper. That's what I would do. So this one has chapters on starting your thesis, your introduction, the title, what kind of questions you're going to ask, just basic stuff. Preparing your dissertation project, project management, ethics, getting clearance, lit review, deciding on your questions, rethinking questions, then the methodology sections, what kind of ethnography, case studies, experimental design, finding the tools to gather the data, how to analyze, thick descriptions, grounded theory. I mean, it's got all this stuff. I mean, it's basically an A to Z. This book is an A to Z to doing research. So if you don't feel comfortable and competent in all those method courses you had, this might be a way to, something to read on a plane going for spring break, or going to Christmas and visiting people, just reading a chapter on the way there and a chapter on the way back, then concluding and writing it up. So those are 4 good books I had sitting. I forgot to introduce them, and I hope that maybe you might find one or more of value. So here we've got all these people trying to get in. Oh, I'm sorry, everybody. I just went through 4 books that you should buy. Digital Tools for Qualitative Research from Sage by my former student Trina Paulus and Jessica Lester, who's at ISD, and then Conducting Qualitative Research and Learning in Online Spaces. It's a Sage book as well by Hannah Gerber, G-R-B-R. The Craft of Research, a guide to doing research, over 7,000 books sold. It is University of Chicago Press, and it is by Wayne Booth, B-O-O-T-H. And then How to Do Your Research Project, a guide for students, Gary Thomas. So all you guys are waiting in the waiting room, and here we got Kim in the waiting room. I'm not going to repeat this all for Kim. Apologies to Kim. Come on in here, Kim. There she is, Kim. Are you with us? So I just introduced 4 books that have been sitting next to me on my shelf. I've been every week trying to introduce these. And so here they are. 3 are Sage. What I'll try and do is have Sunmi and I write this up after class, and then I'll send you all 4 of these books. I recommend buying one used. So mostly on qualitative research, but on research methods. So apologies, you were sitting in the chat while I was introducing these. We got 11 people here tonight. It's more than normal. I will make Sunmi a co-host so that I don't screw up again. So let's see. Sunmi, I'll make a co-host. Okay, here we go. So why do we have so many people? That's great. So invite some more. I'd love the more the better. So before we get started with Chaoran, I want to make sure there aren't questions or solutions. Anyone have something to raise? And I didn't mean, I really didn't mean to leave you in the waiting room. The devil made me do it. Okay, just so you know, it wasn't me. It was my Halloween mask, my Halloween persona. All right. No questions or comments? Well, then, Chaoran, the floor is going to be yours here. I need to make you a co-host then.
Okay.
So Chaoran Wang graduated a year ago, or slightly over a year ago. Went over to Maine, had the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. She's at Kobe College in Waterville.
Yes, Waterville.
Waterville, Maine. So it's about a quarter of the way to a third of the way up the state, right smack dab in the middle with a big waterway nearby.
Yes.
Lovely campus. I've never been there, but I've seen pictures of. So Chaoran majored in learning, language education, culture, and all this, LCLE, and got her master's or in IST. Is that right? Or just a
minor, just minor, yeah.
But is an expert at maker spaces. So Chaoran, you want to tell us a bit about those tips that we're going to walk through, and then we'll go to Maria and she'll give some, and then I'll talk about writing at the end. So about 20, 25 minutes, and we'll do Q&A, and then we'll do another 20, 25 minutes with Maria. So go ahead, Chaoran.
Okay, I will be sharing my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I will be talking about some tips just based on my experience defending a dissertation and collecting and communicating, not communication, data. So a little bit about me. I defended my doctoral dissertation in December 2020. So at that time, all the dissertations actually were defended online. So I was defending online as well. So my dissertation is entitled Examining Synchronous Hybrid English Learning for Children in Rural China, a Hybrid Ethnographic Study. So Dr. Bonk is my minor advisor, and I did this study, which is based on both language learning and also IST related topics. So that's just a little bit about my dissertation background. So in terms of presenting and defending dissertation, I organize it according to a chronological order. So firstly, before the dissertation, I would say, because you write this whole several hundred pages, maybe 200 pages or 300 pages, it's easy that after you finish writing it and you submit it, and then your committee members, they will read it. And then before the defense, probably you forget some of the things you write because it's such a long dissertation. So I would say definitely read your dissertation one more time, or if you have more time, read it multiple times before the defense.
Yeah, you don't want to look like you don't know your dissertation.
Yeah.
Believe me, there are times when you look back at your dissertation, you say, "Oh, did I write that?" There are these peak moments when people write. You elevate beyond yourself, and that's a good dissertation. You're like, "Oh, this is really good." So you do want to learn what you had to say at that time, and sometimes you have to go back and look, and it's perfectly okay.
Yeah. I agree. So actually, when you take some time, and then when you review your dissertation, sometimes you are reading it with a new eye, actually. So that also gives you a new look, and probably you will come up with some new ideas, and you will have some questions even for yourselves, and probably those questions will be asked by committee members as well. So I would also recommend that practice your presentation multiple times. From my experience, the first time I practiced my presentation is with my advisor, my dissertation chair. So I have an initial draft, and I kind of practiced it with her online, and she pointed out some issues, both in terms of design, because my slides, she had some suggestions, and because different advisors will have different suggestions. But for me, because I have to finish my presentation within 30 minutes, and obviously I included a lot of information, and she said, try to cut some of them. And I think that's probably common because you have so much information in the dissertation and you want to include them. But actually 30 minutes is going very fast at that time. So I cut it several slides, and also she gave me suggestions in terms of the bullet points, and also adding more visuals. and presentation delivery. So this has to, I think, people, of course, will want to deliver a fluent presentation. So this can be achieved by practicing more in terms of the time and your fluency. Some people will write the script. So every slide, they will write the whole script in terms of how you deliver it. So that's my case because I defend it online. It's easy to see my script and I can just refer to that whenever I need. But I think if you defend it in person, it's if you have, I went to a few in-person defenses and I didn't see many students have bring their script, but I'm not sure if they did that beforehand. They just don't bring that to the dissertation defense. Or is it that they don't even have a script at all? But for me, I write a script and I practice it a lot of times. So it gives me a very fluent defense at the presentation. And also I was thinking if you defend it in person, so sometimes, you know, you will want to, there are some other things, for instance, the eye contact and the whole room, the kind of atmosphere. And when you have a lot of audience sitting there and you stand there, because when I see people defending in a face-to-face defense, you are the only one who is standing. The rest of people all sit in the room. So that gives you, probably makes you a little nervous as well, because it's very different from online defense. So that's why I would recommend mock defense. So multiple times, so maybe you can practice with your dissertation advisor, and also you can invite your friends and people in your department or people across departments, so that they all came and they can give you some suggestions. And because of that, they when they heard your defense, they probably will ask you some questions. So those questions can also help you to practice defense a little bit. So when you practice or prepare for your presentation, you can also anticipate some questions, which is something I'm going to talk about in my next slide. And the fourth one, wear something you feel comfortable with, in which you feel like yourself. So this will help relieve your nervousness. If you wear something too formal that you'll never wear, and then you go to the occasion and you feel, oh, this is not me, I feel so uncomfortable, that will make you, maybe you're not concentrated on what you're saying, but you're distracted by your outfit. And attend other people's defense. So you can learn a lot actually by attending other people's defense, especially if that person's community member has some overlap with yours. Because I noticed that professors, they tend to ask similar questions, that they have some patterns you can anticipate across different dissertation defense, because different professors, they specialize in different things, and they tend to ask things that are more relevant from their background. And when you go to those defenses, and you can also see the professor's style of asking questions, and how the person respond to that question. So I remember the very last in-person defense I went is someone from learning science. So I learned a lot from that defense, because the student was so confident in addressing all the questions. That is something I have never anticipated, and I never encountered before. So it really, to me, I feel that even as a defense, like I will be very nervous, but I can still be confident and say my opinions, even though sometimes professors' questions, I don't think I can address well, but at least you have to have that confidence to show that you're trying to address the question. So that's something I learned from the kind of manner that that person, in the way that he responds. So researcher committee members, this is something I kind of mentioned before. Some committee members have particular interests. I think you can anticipate certain questions to be asked by certain committee members based on their background. So possible questions, if you think about different sections of your dissertation, some questions.
Chaoran, can I interrupt? I want to comment on a couple of things you said. If you're really practiced and you're really confident, you can dress spiffy and look really good and stuff that you never worn before. I think you either be comfortable, that's the one way to go, or look really grand. You can do either one, and they're both fine. They're both fine. For me, I would want to look grand because it's a one-time kind of thing. For some people, they're so nervous, they need the feeling of some psychological safety and the comfort and the, you know, and familiarity. And so that's one thing that just, there's no one right way in terms of dress, but don't look like you don't care. Don't look like you don't care. Look like you care about your performance. You can attend others, as she said, and you'll learn a lot from watching other professors deliver their questions. If you told me who was on your committee, I can pretty much tell you what kind of questions they're going to ask you. They're going to, I shouldn't say which. I could almost tell you a person, and I'll say that person's going to ask you a method question. And tell you, no, that person, they used to call me the literature review question. I'd look for page numbers in the lit review. Now, not so much, but in the old days I did. So, and you know, somebody might just be on you looking for something that they're confused about. And they're always going to ask the question, they'll start with, I am kind of confused by this one thing. And this, can you clarify this for me? There's others who are just going to ask small kinds of things that, you know, so you're going to have a kind of a wide range. And the way your committee's set up is sort of important. I mean, who's on it to see if they gel pretty well, and your advisor can let you know who gels, and you might want to stay with that. Other people might defend and want a person on the committee who will challenge them. And so that's fine if you want to be challenged. Some people add an extra member. I had 5, I think, on my dissertation because at Wisconsin, they required 5. Here, they had 4 on a PhD, 3 on an EDD. And I've seen many add a person, especially on the PhD level, because they outside member or, you know, an external from another university. We've had, you know, people from University of Houston, well, Karen is, and I've been on ones where Karen is at Houston, in fact, for Sarah McNeil's students. So yeah, so it happens. Trying to think if there's anything else that you mentioned. All these are really relevant points that Chaoran is making. Also, keep in mind, Chaoran works in a writing center. She knows a lot about writing. She advises about writing. And these are some of the things, some of her tips that she's providing to other people. Chaoran, take it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Those are really great points, especially I like that. I would say if I have an in-person defense, I would of course want to wear something I don't know, colorful or memorable. Because you will take pictures after the defense and post it, and everyone can celebrate and send congratulations to you. So you want the pictures to look good as well.
Yeah, so, and also even in break, when you're done defending and your colleagues grab you in the hallway, that's when you take pictures before you find out, or even before you defend, you're taking pictures. So I think it is important to, at least if it is face-to-face. And now tomorrow I have a dissertation defense from Therese. Some of you might know Therese. She's from Granada. She's a Trinidadian. Her and her husband are here right now, and I'm taking her out right after class ends. We're meeting to talk about her dissertation tomorrow. Her defense, she practiced, it was 40 minutes or then 35, and it's way too long. So we're working on getting it down to size, just like Chaoran was saying. So when you practice, turn your computer around. don't look at your slides, or put your computer 20 feet in front of you so you can barely see them. So you're not, when you defend, you know them well enough that you don't have to squint your eyes looking, or you don't have to look back at the back of the screen. Once in a while, it's okay to look back. Once in a while, it's okay to pay homage to the slides. But you don't want to totally pay homage to the slides, because then you don't look like you know what you're doing. You want to be confident enough that you can turn when you need to. You can look at your slides in front of you when you need to. You look at but you want it to be seamless, sort of. You want to make it look like it's part of who you are. Those slides are your beingness, not someone else's being that you pay homage to, that you pray to and genuflect and so forth. The slides are not separate from you. Your talk is not separate from you. It's not a separate entity. It's part of you. The knowledge you've gained. And it's your chance at the end to stand in a soapbox and exclaim what you learned from it. You know, at least at the end of your dissertation, the last 2 pages or 2 paragraphs, you can kind of stand on your soapbox then. And the same is true when you defend. You can kind of give your opinions once in a while. Not all opinions, but it's okay. Faculty want to hear your opinions. They want to know what you feel. How do you feel what's going to happen next based on your research? Where is this research going? What's the gaps that still exist? What should others be exploring? We want to know, because you're the experts, and maybe we'll follow up with a research study after this. So you're going to inform us, not just of your study, but the potential for other follow-ups. And I know Maria's here. There's a lot of potential in Maria's case of follow-up studies, other directions. So she'll talk about that when she gets on here. So, and Chaoran, in one of my books that came out this year, she has a chapter in the book based on her dissertation. So she studied students in rural parts of China learning English and other skills through synchronous collaborative technologies from Shanghai, from US, from other places, with expats and others, trying to help provide these underprivileged youth with instruction that they wouldn't have had normally in the central and western parts of China, because their parents had gone off to East China to get a job in most cases, and had been living with their grandparents and such. Is that right? Do I get that right, Chaoran?
Yes. Thank you.
You can keep going. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No problem. So if you think about different sections of your dissertation, then of course questions came from theoretical frameworks, methods, analysis, findings, and discussions, and implications. So here I make methods different color, because I noticed a lot of students were asked methods questions.
Yes.
And this is also really, I would say, more challenging to be answered, because that's what you already done. And sometimes when you are saying, for instance, positionality question, a lot of people ask that. I was asked that question actually, because I researched ethnic minority students who are different from my background in rural areas. And I would also assume that people ask methods questions a lot is because maybe you're an expert in that topic, right? And theories, maybe it's from your discipline, or maybe you have a committee member who is not from your discipline, but maybe they cannot comment too much about the theory because maybe they're from another discipline. But methods, everyone knows that, the professors, and and that also determines the quality and the rigor of your research. So I would say pay special attention to the method section, and familiarize yourself with what you've done, and be prepared to defend any questions about methods. And you can invite when you do the mock interviews, you can ask your audience, your friends, to come up with some questions they have about your methods as a practice.
I'll stop you again, Chaoran. Go back to this. So I used to be, if you have me on your committee, I used to always ask theory stuff. Now it's on findings, discussion, mostly implications. If you have me in your committee, I probably will not ask method questions, so you breathe a sigh of relief. But if I do ask method questions, they're going to be an easy question. And if you can't answer the easy question, then start breathing heavily, because you got problems. Because my method questions will be easy. Just trust me on that. I'll have more difficult, I hope more interesting questions about the implications of your research, the gaps, the limitations I'm particularly interested in, and of course the findings and discussion of those findings. To me, that's more important. I use other faculty focus in on method because they're researchers. They're all researchers. I think I don't focus on the method section because I look at myself as a global educator who wants to use your findings and wants to know where this is going. And maybe Maria will contest that and might say, Dr. Bonk, you asked me all these method questions. No, I don't think I did, Maria, but we'll get to Maria in a little bit. She's probably laughing there. Go ahead, Chaoran.
Yeah, sure. I just want to I quite agree with you. For me, after I do this dissertation, I realize actually the findings, discussions, and implications are really important because as a someone who graduated from a PhD program, you don't just want to do some a research study that can be like a template. You do this study and you use this theory and then that's done. But you want to make some unique contributions to the field, and some people make unique contributions in terms of the methods or the theory, and you expand the theory a little bit. That's what I think what is really important in a doctoral dissertation, is because you are making some contributions.
You know, Maria was smiling there. She might want to jump in here and add a comment or two. Maria, would you like to add anything to what Chaoran has said? I know you're going to come in later, but why don't you offer us something now? Because you were smiling. There had to be something you wanted to make.
First of all, I would like to say hi, everybody. I'm right now in Kazakhstan visiting my family.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's about 4:35 a.m. here on November 2nd. so I'm an early bird today and everybody is sleeping here. So I'm sorry if I will be quiet a little bit. But yeah, it's great to see you and to meet some new people here. I see quite a few new faces. In terms of methods, yeah, I think methodology is super important. I think I'm going to talk in terms of my perspective as an EDD student, because I completed my EDD program from ISC. So yeah, I had some questions about methodology, and you know, I was thinking about what tips I can provide to you guys. And one of the most important things that I learned from my experience defending my dissertation is that you need to know your research very well, not only in terms of your research, but in terms of your methodological and theoretical components. Because one thing is to write your dissertation and present it, but the other thing is to defend it. And the word defend is very important here. You need to be able to say why you use this collection data method and not others, why you use this conceptual theoretical framework and not others, why you use something here and not others, why you selected these articles and not others for your literature review. And I think the best way to go about it is just to provide all these explanations in your dissertation paper, but you might also need to bring them up during your dissertation defense. But so far, what Dr. Wang is saying is great, because I hear so many tips here. So I would be making some notes if I was a student who was about to defend my dissertation. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think Maria would agree that even if it's clear to you, you have to put it in your method section. It might not be clear to particular members, the method. So you might have to over-explain at times. And Maria is a recent grad, so she's graduated. I think the official day was in August, so it's not that long ago, not that far removed, that she was going through the process studying English language learning in Kazakhstan, but from the US. So traveled to Kazakhstan during her was during COVID times. It was difficult to get there. So that's why I'm surprised you're there. You didn't let me know. So it's great. I think you're the first guest in one of Bonk's classes from Kazakhstan. Live from Kazakhstan. So Chaoran, how many more slides do you have left? I'm just curious.
maybe okay.
Oh,
Okay, I got 10 in total.
Yeah, yeah,
So
well, that's
now
fine.
it's okay.
Kind of hit the highlights of them, so we'll get to Maria.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I will just skip this. And question types. So as Dr. Bonk mentioned in the beginning, there are different types. So here I summarized a few. For instance, explanation and clarification questions. A faculty member might ask you, oh, on page blah, 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 and you mentioned this. Can you tell me more about that? So these kind of things I think are easier to answer because you already know them. Some professors might ask you to reflect on what you have done and say, if you were to do it again, how would you do it differently? And future plans. What publications do you plan to work on based on this dissertation? I find this question really helpful because that helped me to think about how I can turn my dissertation into some possible publications that's even helpful after I graduate. And Dr. Bonk asked me this question and gave me
Yes,
some
I did.
suggestions. Yeah.
I asked Maria that too.
Yeah, and here comes a kind of a challenging question, a real defense question. I would frame it that way. What you have admitted and important things you have addressed, but not. This part you have to really defend yourself well and try to acknowledge, okay, maybe I didn't do this, but I have some reasons, or maybe I can elaborate on that more in my writing. And so I would say these are the hardest parts, and something probably is less predictable. So be prepared to answer that. So during the defense, I would say, so put yourself in a good mood. You're doing this work for years, right? And you really want to convey what you're doing to the audience and let everybody know this such a great work you have done. So if you think about it in that way, you really want to convey your information. So that will give you the passion to deliver your presentation during the defense. And think before you respond. So sometimes when you get a question, I mean, maybe it's too hard, or maybe you haven't prepared that, and maybe that question is too surprising to you. If you feel you're not ready yet, you can pause for a few seconds and organize your thoughts a little bit. I didn't do this well, I think, because I kind of, when I hear a question that I cannot address, I don't have a very initial response. I just kind of wondering about, and I kind of ramble and talk about various of different things before I get my focus. This is my way of brainstorming my response. I think it's acceptable to do that as long as your brainstorming doesn't take too much time, and because that will your audience will get lost and they think you are not addressing the question directly. So you can either pause and think for a few seconds, or if you want to brainstorm your answer, then do it quickly and then get straight to your answer. So I think one way of think about framing your response, if you think about writing a very a paragraph essay form, right? You have a thesis statement, you have a topic sentence, and then comes the evidence. So you can have a summarizing thesis that directly answer the question, and then you elaborate with more points and evidence. So that gives professors a really clear structure in terms of the way that you respond to the question. But that doesn't happen a lot sometimes. That's just idealistic, but I think sometimes it happened, but if you can try your best to structure your answer in a more clear way. Accept your nervousness, but do not be too nervous. When I would become nervous, I would just try to record stories that I heard from students. How many failure stories have you heard? I don't hear a lot. So I think my possibility of passing the defense is very high. So I get optimistic when thinking about that. Ask clarification questions when the question is unclear to you. Don't be afraid to ask them to paraphrase their question. And thank committee members for their great questions, and then follow up with your structured response. You can recognize their doubts, questions, concerns, and suggestions, and then tell them how you have addressed them or how you will address them. I remember there's a committee member, she didn't, so there's a very important key participant in my dissertation study. He is a local ethnic minority, but she thought that my participant is a Han Chinese, which is the majority. And because my participant made some remarks about about students in a way that she felt too critical, I would say. And she brought this question, and she didn't really read my dissertation in terms of that part clearly. So I cannot corrected her in a polite way. I try to be polite because I don't want to say you didn't read that part clearly. Don't take critical comments personal. It's about your work, it's not about you. And if you think about committee members just want to help you improve your work, it's not criticizing you. It doesn't, sometimes they criticize, when they have critical comments, yeah, just don't take it personal. So that in that way you don't, because I lost my sleep after the defense. I keep thinking about the comments in my head. So okay, I will get to this part very quickly. Data collection. So get your equipment ready, which I didn't do well during my first class observation because my SD card doesn't have enough storage. I would say get multiple devices, equipment, cell phones, cameras, or other GoPro cameras, things like that. If you have various equipments, and borrow them from the ITS. Don't resist from learning new things and collect various formats and copies of data. I realized I didn't collect enough data, types of data after I finished my defense, because after the defense, I realized I had to convey my dissertation to a variety of audiences in a variety of formats. For instance, Dr. Bonk invited me to the Silver Lining for Learning. And in that case, audience is different from when you write. So I realized I should have included more pictures or other multimodal data, because you will be writing, you will also be having presentation, and maybe you have other creative means of disseminating your work. So don't just limit your thinking into having this written dissertation, but also think about other possible ways that you can make your dissertation speak to other audiences. Organize and store your data, of course, at least 2 copies, and find a system to name your files and keep your goals, your research questions in mind. Always more is better than less. And take notes on interesting or significant data while collecting them. So for me, I was doing ethnographic research, and every day I have a lot of thinking, but whenever I get back to my hotel after a whole day staying at the school, just too tired to write down my like keep the journal going. So there are a few days I feel so tired I didn't keep my journal updated, but if I can, I would say I would try every means. Even if I'm tired, I cannot write it down, but I might get a recording and just talking to the recorder and talk about what my thoughts today and what interesting or significant data that I found. And rapport building with your participants. That is especially so when I work with my school and the organization, there are various people that I work with, and you don't want to do your dissertation as just a one-time thing. I think it's important to have this rapport building, because if you think about the power relations between researcher and participants and how you benefit from doing this work, but they're spending a lot of time helping with you. So I think that's important. And talk to your advisor if you run into challenging situations during data collection. So last slide, I think. Ask your advisor their preference on frequency and method of communication while you're writing your dissertation, because different advisors prefer different ways of working with you. So for me, my advisor wants me to send the first few pages of each chapter beforehand, before each of our meeting. And then she also meet with me, I would say during the summer, every week, I think. So just update my progress. And every time she expect me to send something beforehand. So different advisors have different expectations, make that clear. So ask your advisor their expectations on communication, and finish your work early so that you can give your advisor time to read your work and provide feedback. So this is a good habit. You don't want to say, tomorrow we are meeting, can I send it to you tonight? Finish reading my chapter so we can talk about it tomorrow. That's not the proper way. If they don't reply your email, just send a gentle reminder, and seek advice from the rest of the committee. I think a lot of students have this question, how often should I communicate with my dissertation chair, and should I even communicate with the rest of the committee member? I would say it really depends on, firstly, seek the advice from your dissertation chair. If they recommend that you can keep the rest of your committee informed, then you can do it, but less frequently, of course, compared with your chair. And also, in my case, my advisor, because there's one particular committee member in my committee, she specializes in China, so she wanted me to talk with her in terms of some literature in terms of China. So that's why I initiated the meeting with that committee member, and make sure they're adequately consulted, but do not bother them too much. For instance, you don't want to send each of your chapter to them. I think that's it.
I'm muted. I'll make 4 comments, then we're going to have a panel. Chaoran, if you could hang around, we'll let students ask you and Maria questions. Maria was thinking this was a panel tonight, and so she doesn't have specific slides to present. She'd rather respond to your questions. So this is great. It works out perfect because we can both have the presentation from Chaoran and a panel from both of you. But I have 4 things I want to mention that Chaoran alluded to at the very end there. One was that I do ask a question about publishing, but it's more specific than that, than what she alluded to. I want to know what your specific timeline is and what the specific journals you are targeting. So what are you going to publish and when? That builds commitment. So I want to see, at least from my point of view, some sense of goal setting or commitment that will indicate the maturity of your thought behind the dissertation, and that you won't just move on from a one-off study and go off and explore something else, that you've committed to taking that to the next phase of actual publication, or maybe to the phase 2 of this same study. So that's why I'd want to know more than that. Well, you can get away with giving limited discussion of publishing, because you can sort of cover it up by all the other questions that are asked. But when it gets to my turn, I will ask you about that. Second thing, the SIM card. I had the same problem with my dissertation. Even though the technology you look at is reliable, even though your laptop has worked for 10 years, it will fail at some point during your dissertation. There'll be something that goes wrong with the technology. Maybe it's small, maybe it's large. For me, I had Zippo-disks, this little floppy, thicker floppy, and I lost all the data because I thought a vacuum cleaner got too close to the computer's lab that I was in. But in actuality, those zip disks could only handle 112 files at the root, the base directory. IBM didn't write the software code adequately, and I didn't ever notice it because I never had more than 112 files in a disk before. And so I had to learn how to use Norton Utilities and put the sections of my papers back together like Humpty Dumpty. The third thing is that Chaoran was on a Silver Lining for Learning. That's a podcast show. So she's been on my podcast show. She's got a chapter in my book. She's presented my class, and that's an indication that she's an extremely knowledgeable scholar, and we should all thank her for coming today. Even though she's not done, we're not going to let her go. So, and the fourth and final thing, she mentioned that more is better in collecting data. I'm a former accountant. Accountants believe more is more. I believe more is better. Most educators think less is more. Most people in education space think cognitive dissonance. If you collect too much, you can overwhelm the thought process. I'm trained in cognitive psychology. I understand that point of view, but I still believe more is more. More is always going to be more, just as a side point. So let's ask, I know we got one question in the Jamboard so far. Let's ask Maria and Chaoran to try and answer your questions. So who has a question from the Jamboard? I know someone does.
Mine, I know it was.
Go ahead, Ashad.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. Let me go read it out then. The question was actually related to frameworks. Yeah, I was like, what kind of questions would they ask about theoretical frameworks?
Yeah, I think I can jump into that. It took me a while to maybe develop my conceptual framework. And one important thing is that it should really align with your research. And you should be prepared to explain why you selected this specific framework. Because, I had some when the first time I developed my proposal, I had some, I would not say very clear idea why I selected this framework. But as I went through all the stages of writing my dissertation, I started to see how I can align my conceptual framework better with what I was doing. So, and you can always do that as you go. You don't have to select the perfect conceptual framework starting from your writing your dissertation proposal, dissertation proposal. So you can develop it later as you go, so you can align it. And I think here it's important to talk to your dissertation committee chair and maybe other dissertation committee members and see what they think about that.
So that was a question that hung me up. One of my advisors said to me, "You've got a really nice, wonderful description of neo-Vygotskian research on scaffolded learning and zones of proximal development and intersubjectivity and mutual knowledge. But what does this have to do with your dissertation?" And it had a lot to do, but I didn't have an answer. I didn't think about it at the time. It had a lot to do with it. My other committee members just wanted to meet my son, who came from Korea 3 days before. He was waiting in the hallway. They gave me a pass. There were no problems. But the one person who didn't give me the easy pass, he asked about that question about how does the theoretical approach that you described in your lit review relate to the methods in the dissertation. So, Chaoran, you wanted to answer that question too. I see you got the unmuted and you're muted. Go ahead, Chaoran.
Yeah, I have. So Maria, I agree with you. Why do you select it? And that responds to also Dr. Bonk's experience. So I would say when you write your theoretical framework chapter, also think about the accuracy, whether you get the theory correctly, and also did you miss any important scholarly work. And also think about when they start writing about the theoretical frameworks, that's actually from the dissertation proposal stage. They already know what theory they probably are going to use. But by the time they defend their dissertation, probably there are some more recent works coming up. So you want to keep your reference list or the people that you cite most up to date. I think when I was reading the final write-up and with my dissertation proposal, I added a lot of things because of pandemic and the research about synchronous or online or hybrid instruction. There are more research coming out. So I added a lot of more recent work in order to just to get a more complete picture of my theory, and also how you apply your theory into your research. So I used a kind of sociological theory, which is from Oh wow, I forgot his name. Okay, I used the one from Anderson, which is from
Terry Anderson used.
Yeah, Terry Anderson, and the other is Goffman. Yeah.
Yes, Goffman, right.
Yeah. So I expanded his theory a little bit based on my findings. So I kind of innovated a little bit in terms of how to, because he used the interaction. So my theoretical framework is micro interaction, which is micro sociology. So I expand his theory, expand it from face-to-face interaction to online and hybrid interaction. So my committee members was interested how I expand the theory. So I had to, in my slide, I have to show how I coded it and how my data is very new and cannot be explained by the older framework, and ways that I can expand it. So if you are having some innovations in your data or the way that you interpret your theory, you'd better be prepared. I think people will definitely ask that question.
Yeah, and another thing I just remembered, that you can modify or edit your conceptual framework. For example, my framework was about needs analysis and language teaching and learning. And I took this framework, and because it related to a specific course, but I didn't want that. I wanted it to relate to general teaching and learning. So I slightly modified this framework. And based on this modification, I also developed my interview questions. So if you conduct your research and you cannot find a conceptual framework that exactly fits your research, maybe you can look at some frameworks that might fit, and maybe you can slightly modify them.
Okay, modification, can I combine two different frameworks if I want to? Take aspects from this, aspect from this?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you can even take different frameworks and maybe develop something on your own, but just don't forget to make sure to include all these references and show all your logic in your writing. So when you present your paper and in your dissertation, in your actual dissertation paper, so you need to explain how you develop this conceptual framework.
And you can also, with your instruments, change them and modify them, but you have to say adapted and modified from and cite the original source. You may have to get new validity and reliability perhaps, but sometimes you can get away with minor changes to existing instruments that already has the validity and reliability data just by citing and saying you've transformed it slightly or modified it. I want to point out on Goffman. So Goffman's daughter, Elise, won Dissertation of the Year award in 2011, all sorts of New York Times bestseller award and all this stuff for her dissertation, but then she got in trouble for data fabrication and potentially an accomplice to a crime, to a murder, data fabrication and criminal misconduct. So I put in the chat her Wikipedia page, but you might want to read the original source or go to the Chronicle of Higher Education or some other place. She went to Wisconsin as a professor. I think she was in Philadelphia, Megan, maybe at Temple, maybe at UPenn, I forget which one it was, and then got a job at Wisconsin in sociology department, and then got in trouble. People started investigating the data and it didn't match up. Her stories weren't matching up properly. So this is an extreme case of running into a problem with dissertation. So I just want to have you all err on the side of caution. Don't overstate your claims, or at least talk to your advisor if you're going to make a claim that's a little bit beyond your data, and see if it's okay with him or her or with your committee members. It might be perfectly fine. You might be too cautious. You can be too cautious, but you don't want to be overly excited and passionate about your research so much that you gleam over the ethical issues that are very, very important in conducting your study. We all want to get charged up about our research. We all want to make an impact. We all we all hope we don't find negative or no significant difference. We all hope for the significant difference, but no significant differences is still a finding, and it's still publishable, and it's still defendable for a dissertation. You don't have to make something up to make it be significant, or fudge the data. You don't want to fudge your data. You want to have it be grounded and sound. And if it didn't come out exactly the way you'll still pass if you defend it well. It's that your passing won't depend on the exact findings. You'll have to have findings, but we're not looking for you to have a particular outcome. There's hopeful outcomes, there's hypotheses, and there's predictions and research questions. There's hopeful things, but there's a big difference between that and fudging your data. Don't do that. Don't you get us in trouble. You'll get in trouble. And so check that Wikipedia page out. That might provide you with a momentary, at least, reflection on the side of caution. Other questions from all of you, because I know there's 12 of you tonight. We have many people here tonight. Oh, thanks for finding the Chronicle article that you put in there. Thank you very much. Who put that in there? No, Chaoran did. Okay, so yeah, Chaoran and I've been reading this. We've been, I shared that with her when she was, yeah. Other questions? Kim, give us a question.
I'm so sorry. I was looking for my buttons. So I would say, my question would be, out of all of the questions that you were asked that day, for each of you, what was a question that really stuck out in your mind that you go back to and you're like, I should have answered that differently? And how can we prepare for that?
I'll let them think about it. I've already given mine when Rich Lair, who later moved from Wisconsin to Vanderbilt, he's a very smart guy, asked me the question about Vygotsky and how my dissertation data related to that, because we're using computer prompts in writing as an outside other, and in scaffolding learning through technology, not a human being, not a more knowledgeable peer, not a more expert like adult. We're using technology to scaffold, and looking at kind of extending Vygotsky's theory into a digital world. And that was an easy connection I just didn't make. Also using the keystrokes and other things, I could have made a number of things about incremental development over time, and looked at students' development across age groups, within themselves. There's also human development stuff that could have brought out that I later did when I wrote up the stuff. Chaoran, you have an answer for that?
I couldn't remember, but I think I didn't. The first question I didn't answer well. I think when committee member asked, "Do you want to work in the U.S. or China? Why?" This question really get me stuck, because I don't know the motivation of asking that question and how that has to do with my research. And I think sometimes when you hear a question, even if it's hard, but you understand that question is about your research, you know what people are asking. But when I was asked, "Do you want to work in the U.S. or China? Why?" That gets me thinking, why does this person ask me this question? Should it be hard or should it be easy? Or is he asking me this in a very friendly way just to get me warm up? Or should I answer it so seriously?
Was it my question?
No, that's not yours.
Maria, what do you think, Maria?
I don't remember the exact question, but I remember it was about my sample that I selected. So I would recommend that all of you will introduce yourself well with statistics, because I conducted semi-structured interviews and I conducted the survey, and I had certain samples for both of these data collection methods. And one question that was stuck in my head was about how can I claim that these samples that I selected are valid for my study, And, you know, it was like, I think I used a random sampling technique, but I wasn't quite sure. So, so I had to come back to my statistics course and review all these terms and make sure I'm doing the right thing. So make sure before you defense, introduce yourself with all the statistical terms. And you probably, I'm not sure, but I think you have already taken your statistics course. So make sure you review all the terms there, make sure you understand all the statistical techniques that you're using in your research, if you're using any. So that will be very helpful. So you don't have to stand and think what you did and why you did it and how you did it. Well, like minutes and minutes.
Yeah, I'll add to that in that if there are certain statistical terms you use, try to speak the definition without looking at anything. And that way, when you come to the defense, you'll talk about, you know, sequential methods or whatever it is, some mixed methods design or something else that you're using, or critical ethnography or whatever. You've got that definition. You at least can rely on, you know, at least something because you've memorized the definitions or within the context of your study.
Yeah,
Well,
and and actually, what helped me is that I was an online student, so I wasn't on campus at all. So, and what helped me was that I just contacted a statistician at IU. I think they offer some services. I didn't know that before until I started to work on my dissertation. So they offer these services to students. They're free consultations. So if you have some questions about your statistical data, you can easily talk to, like, I think there are 2 assistants who are working there. So you can talk to them and address all your questions. And that really helped me because not only, like, it's not that this assistant provided me all the answers, but we were able to talk and brainstorm. And by the end of our consultation, I was like, oh, okay, I see. Yeah, that's what I thought, actually. I just wanted to confirm my thoughts. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach to other like assistants, like graduate assistants or professionals on campus, because I think people are very helpful and friendly. So they are ready to help. You just need to ask for help.
Really good point. And we do have those services. You can also ask a friend. Let's take 2 or 3 questions before Maria and Chaoran leave, and we'll take a break, and I'll give some of my best writing tips of all time after we come back from that. So we'll take 2 or 3. So how about Yua? She just posted up there. Yua, you got a question?
Oh, no, I just replying to Maria's comments on the stats services.
Thank you.
Great. And I guess, Dr. Bonk, I can add, I mean, I have a few points that I wanted to talk about. So they're just very brief points considering the time. So one point is about revisions. I think my advice would be to obtain a revision list from each committee member, if you can. So, and make sure you review them carefully so you don't miss any important details that they mentioned. So, and make sure you understand these revisions, because most of the time I heard from my colleagues before that they start to work on revisions, but they didn't really understand them correctly. That happens, and they do a lot of work, but then it's just a waste of time. So make sure you just understand them, and if you don't be afraid of asking your committee members again for some clarification. And another thing is that for me, as for an ADD student, it was important to build my dissertation committee. And since I'm an online student, it was very hard for me to be on campus and communicate with my professors or my fellow colleagues and other students. So I would suggest, even if you're busy, even if you have a family and you're working full time, find some time when you can build your committee, dissertation committee. It will be super important later in the future for you. And what I mean by that is, like, try if you can, but I would strongly suggest that you will go to campus and talk to your professors. And during this talk, you can find out about their professional and personal interests, and that will help you to identify committee members that would be grade for your dissertation committee. So I think I went to campus maybe several times, and I definitely would recommend doing that because it will help you to personally learn about your professors and to see them. It always helps. So yeah, don't hesitate doing that. And if you have this chance, so use this chance.
And Maria's right nearby in Columbus, if you didn't mention that, which is only
Mhm.
45 minutes away. So
Yep.
it's easier for you to do it than maybe some of the others. But
Yeah.
Kim drove here last spring from the East Coast. So, you know,
Oh,
you can
okay,
get
yeah.
there. People can get here. So,
Yeah,
you
the
know,
first time when I visited IU, I was in Kansas. Then I moved to Nebraska, and I think I'm not sure if I visited IU from Nebraska. Maybe I did. And then I moved to Columbus, Indiana. So that was easier. That made my life easier.
much easier, much easier. I'm not suggesting you need to move to Indiana. You know, it's not going to be at the top of my list of places to move to, but there are good places. There are a couple of really nice cities. Columbus is one, Bloomington's another one, Indianapolis is another one. There are some good places in Indiana. Who's got a question? Karen came all the way from Texas to be with us. Karen, do you have a question for either of our panelists?
Well, I can think of one, and it's really just how to handle those questions that you're not really prepared for, and you're not so sure about the answer, or even what the question means. When I was doing my master's, one of the professors really just asked me a question that just really threw me. My master's was in chemistry, and I prepared for it really well. I had all of these, I thought I understood the topic pretty well, and I was really great on that. And then he said something to me. He says, "Can you put some chicken wire on the board?" And the question was just so far away from me. It was so far away from chemistry. I had no clue what he was talking about. And that really just frazzled me to the point where, I mean, it took that little question to answer that question took at least 30 minutes because I was completely frazzled. So I'm kind of wondering, like, what your recommendations would be when you enter a situation like that, because I felt for sure. I was like, okay, I just flunked. I took 30 minutes to answer this stupid question. you know so what would be your recommendations? How would you handle and prepare for something like that?
I think if a question is too irrelevant, or I don't know, or too challenging, or maybe firstly, you can ask that committee member to kind of frame it in a different way. But also, I think your advisor will also intervene if he or she finds that question is kind of off track. And they
I
cannot
don't know.
present
Nobody
it.
intervened.
But also feel free to acknowledge your I mean, sometimes a professor maybe ask a very tricky or super challenging question to maybe to show that they are smart. I don't know, Dr. Bonk, if that's true. They just want to show they are smart. They don't care if you can get it right or not. In that case, you just acknowledge you don't know. I'm not sure if that's a bad advice, Dr. Bonk.
If you're very bold, you can ask this person to paraphrase the question or explain the relevancy to your work.
Yeah.
So you can definitely do that if you're very bold. Yeah. The other
Maria,
thing is, like,
sometimes
One of the
Maria's
things,
bold and sometimes maybe.
right? I know I'm not very bold at all. One of the things that I figured out after I got to the answer of the question is that a little bit of it was the fact that I was migrant. I was, I came from a different country, and his terminology, I'm not familiar with it. I was not familiar with it at all. So I think he was trying to make it as as common as possible. But for me, because it wasn't my language, so I couldn't make any sense of it. So I don't think it was ill-intended at all. I think for all of us, it turned out to be greater than either one of us expected, but I was just completely frazzled, and I was like, okay, so how can I prepare better for something like that?
Okay. And
Question
another
though,
way,
what's a chicken wire in chemistry?
Say that again?
What is a chicken wire in chemistry?
Yeah, so he was trying to get me to draw benzene rings.
Oh, that's not a chicken wire.
I know, but when he wanted to put all the benzene rings together, and then it looks like chicken wire. That's what I figured. but yeah, during the defense, I couldn't get any sense of that. Yeah.
So we've gotten some solutions for you. What Chaoran and what Maria said is to ask to reframe, or ask to paraphrase it, or say thank you and then do either one of those. Thank you for making me reflect on this. I hadn't thought about that before, but can you reframe that, because this is a new concept for me, or a new way of thinking.
Yeah.
And then what I would say is, it depends. I'll start off. I was in New Zealand once, from South Island to the North Island. I got taken off the plane by Mr. Bean. You seen Mr. Bean from the UK?
Yes.
This guy looked like Mr. Bean. He wasn't actually Mr. Bean, but Mr. Bean asked me to be on national television the next day, Channel 1. I got to the studio before anyone else, and they gave me 3 questions that they're going to ask on national TV. And they had an hour. They kept going. We're going to go to Hamilton, New Zealand, to go with this experts in e-learning and all that stuff. And finally, when the show's about ready to end, at the end of the 8 o'clock in the morning, well, we have this famous professor from Indiana University, and Professor Bonk, can you tell us what the state of e-learning is? And I said, blah, 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 because that was not one of the 3 questions I memorized for an hour. So, and then they went to the guy next to me, who was the pro vice chancellor of the institution. He worked for Margaret Thatcher in Britain. He was very smooth and polished. They go back to me, and so I take a taxi back to the conference. I'm getting out of my taxi, and this guy gets in. He takes the taxi from me. He goes, "Oh, you're just on national TV." Ha 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 ha. So first time on national television, I looked like a total fool because I didn't have the answer. Then I gave my keynote at the conference, and Mr. Bean walks up. He says, "You'd like to be on national radio?" I said, "Sure, I can't screw it up more than I did national television." The first question they asked me on national radio was, what's the state of e-learning? By that time, I had an answer. It depends. So that "it depends" will get you out of a lot of jams. Just remember some of those phraseology things. Ask to paraphrase, ask to reframe, say thank you. I hadn't thought about that previously. And sometimes you can do that long enough, so they've actually forgotten the question, and you pan around to the rest of the audience. Does anyone have another question for me? Politicians never answer questions they're asked. They just go ramble on about, so first, thank you, and do something. And then you state an answer that has maybe nothing to do with the question they asked, just something you could say, and then move on with life. And that was the best you could have done at that point in time. It's a brilliant move if you can find the right segues and the right reflection, but it depends will get you out a lot of jams, and a lot of embarrassing. Now, this video plays at a different speed back then in New Zealand than the US. So I got a copy of the video, but I've never watched it because it couldn't play on the televisions here in the US. So I just know that, and all my friends at the conference were wondering what the heck happened to me. It's just a stupid question, anyways. They did ask me a question I knew after that, so I did not look totally stupid. 1 or 2 more questions. Ben, we haven't heard from any guys in the room except for me. So let's hold up the male gender here and ask a really smart question.
Okay, no pressure. I won't. Well, it's not a smart question, but a pressing question.
Okay.
On the methodology questions, I don't know if you had much experience with research before your dissertation. I do not. So I think I'd struggle going beyond a methodology answer that goes past the book told me to do it. So do you have any other suggestions on supporting your methodology?
I think if you follow the book, like methodology basically is what you did and why you did it that way. And if you have a good rationale for everything, at least you're well prepared, and also be ready to clarify things, because methodology people will expect. For instance, if you sometimes in your slide you will have like a coding part. People might want to go back to that slide and ask specific questions about how you analyze your data. So if you think about methodology, the whole process, there are data collection and data analysis, and think about how you can justify why you collect these data and why you analyze it in that way, and how can I explain that process to them. Yeah, and I'm not sure if Dr. Bonk and Maria has a better suggestion.
And don't forget to cite all your resources. So that's super important, because you might lose your references because like you lost your file or something else. So yeah. But another thing to think about it in terms of your research questions, because your research questions are the core of your research, at least in my opinion. So you know your research questions very well, then you can move to developing, not to developing, but to selecting your data collection methods. So they have to be aligned here. And depending like whether you conduct interviews, for example, you might look for data collection, for techniques of how to analyze interviews, right? So there are probably like hundreds of them. So select the one that you think you can do, because you might have like these grand plans about what you can do, but in reality, you might not have time, energy, or maybe even motivation to complete all of them. So thinking about research in terms of like maybe a practical means, like what you can really do. So if you conduct interviews and you selected, let's say like, I'm going to use thematic analysis to analyze my interviews. Thematic analysis is huge. I mean, you may find some like subcategories for this analysis, and you might tackle them instead of like trying to write in your dissertation, oh, I use this to analyze my interviews. But it might be too broad and unclear. So you might spend some time just reading literature about methodology and see how this literature aligns with your research questions. And maybe after that, you can divide your methodologies in different small groups and tackle them step by step. I don't know if it makes sense, but at least that's how I did it.
So Ben, I'll go back to the 2 of the 4 books I introduced at the beginning: How to Do Your Research Project, The Guide for Students, and The Craft of Research. Read either one of these, you'll feel more confident in conducting your study. The other 2 books were more on qualitative research, and again, I'll put those. I apologize again for you in all the waiting room, because I was having a good old time presenting on these books, and you guys are all sitting there. I didn't see them. But I will say that while you're presenting your study, your dissertation, you'll be at you're riding a different wave than maybe the rest of your life. For those of you just doing an EDD, maybe not doing much research after this, there might be a big drop off after you finish. The tidal wave will come in, and you're surf all the way to the beach, and you'll pass your dissertation. And then what happens next? Well, you might not conduct additional research, or you might. But the first time or the first go at something like a dissertation, the tenacity it takes to complete a dissertation, the perseverance, is something unlike no other thing you've done previously. And the same is true of, it's both. So Chaoran is a PhD, was a PhD, Maria an EDD, and it was true for both. It's true for PhD and EDD students alike. It's the biggest thing you're going to do, or one of the biggest things you're going to do in your life. And so you just know your dissertation. Just read related to your dissertation. If they ask you questions that are not related to your dissertation, your advisor will bail you out at some point. You don't have to worry about those other things. You might want to read a bit about them, but just know as Maria said, know your research questions, know what you're basing them on, know your methodology and how it relates to each of those questions. So I think a big trip up for a lot of people is when they lay out the discussion, to lay it out in order of their research questions, so that makes common sense. So when the reader's going through it, oh, that's Ben's first question. Okay, that's Ben's second question, and so forth. I think if you do that, if people are not confused, they won't be asking you those difficult questions because there's clarity. The more clarity you make, the more cross references between, as mentioned in chapter 3, as mentioned in chapter 2, not much research was done in this area. So the more interconnectedness and the more logical flow, that will eliminate a lot of those difficult questions when it comes down to methodology, and then we can have a conversation with you. And that's what you want. You want to have a defense where people are talking like, oh, how might you do something, next year following up this study? Or did you collect additional data that you didn't tell us about, and might you publish that as well? So a lot of students collect extra data, and that's okay. I think that's great. And sometimes they don't even tell their whole committee. They might tell their advisor that they're collecting extra data along the way, and or a pilot study that might lead to something bigger. So I didn't answer exactly your question, but I'm working around it. You got to work around it by being as logical as you can be, as clear as you can be, as cited, as Maria said, to cite as much things as you can be. You do those things, and then the slip-ups, and if there is one or two slip-ups along the way, well, that's rectifiable, but you don't want to have too many so you're falling down. You want to be able to be propped up to some degree. We all are going to have changes. Everyone has changes. I had 2 dissertations of 125 that had no changes, okay? So that means it's 99.5% of dissertations have some revisions, and
I guess one more thing is it's important not to have a big gap between your data collection stage and between your data analysis stage, especially if you're like an online student, because when you collect your data, your mind is still fresh with all these ideas, with all these notes that you made during your interviews or when you collected data from your survey. So you want to jump and start to analyze your data if you can. I mean, I know sometimes it's almost impossible because family and work get in the way, but try to find this time period when you can just sit down and be focused and try to analyze your data without anybody distracting you. Because that's the moment, like maybe, I don't know, for me, it was the most exciting moment of writing my dissertation, because it's some kind of culmination moment when you can see, oh, okay, I see how all this codes come together, how all these themes come together. So that's super important to not to have a big gap. And by gap, I mean like maybe when you have like months or years, like for example, you collected your data in 2020 and then you started to analyze it in 2021 or 2022, that might not work well. So it's important to have the stages together. And after you complete them, then I think you will have a better maybe a better research in general, because it's still fresh in your mind and you were able to examine all these patterns together rather than separately.
Right,
I
exactly.
have
That's a good point.
just
Chaoran,
Yeah, just very 2 quick comments. First one, I think methodology, if you, if you go search in the ProQuest, you can find other dissertations, and because methodology are normally written in very detailed way in dissertations versus journal articles, you can see some examples of how other people write it, approach it, and analyze them. For instance, the coding, how they did that. So that gives you, if you search the same methodology across different topics, then you can see how the same methods can be used differently. That gives you a good some examples of how other people do it. And also the IU has the inquiry department. They have like inquiry workshops, and they also have the inquiry consultation. So I went to the consultation a few times in terms of doing the debriefing my the research methods. It both helps me like adding clarity and also to add the validity of my methodology. So that was really helpful, because when you make the appointment, that person is devoted to working with you in terms of all your research. And if you meet with him continuously, he knows everything about your research. So
I have to add a third thing I mentioned for the New Zealand conference. So the end of the conference comes up, And they had all the keynotes line up. John Hedberg, famous guy from Singapore and Australia, and Jilly Salmon from the UK, and then me and maybe one other person. And the guy running the conference says, okay, the keynotes are lined up. Now they're going to tell us what the state of e-learning is. Everybody wanted to know what the state of e-learning is. Why? Because in 2002, e-learning was hot, number one. And number two, what else is going on in 2002 in New Zealand? Does anyone know what happened in 2002 in New Zealand? 20 years ago? So in Korea, 20 years ago was the World Cup. In New Zealand, the Lord of the Rings came out, and it was all filmed in New Zealand. So New Zealanders were thumping their chests and saying, oh, rah, 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 New Zealand. But they also wanted to be known for something else. And they thought that something else could be e-learning. But so did Taiwanese people, so did the Koreans, so did Singaporeans. Everyone wanted to, and Dubai and Abu Dhabi, they all wanted to be known for, no one became known as the e-learning country. But Lord of the Rings, that put them on the map. That's a true story. I was asked this stupid question just because of Lord of the Rings, which I love Lord of the Rings. So we do have a time for another half question. So does anyone have another question or a half a question? Sabah, we haven't heard from you, and you're the only PhD student here. So you want to ask a question that relates to PhD dissertations?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of important questions are answered. Also, one of my pressing questions was what to do if you don't really know the answer. You just say, I don't know. Some people say saying I don't know is bad. Just say something, even though it's not a very smart answer, or yeah. So but I think
Maria?
And another thing, like if somebody asks you a very challenging question and you yourself know that, yeah, I didn't really include this in my dissertation, you can always admit that. And you can also say that you will include that in your revisions. So that's one way of approaching it, rather than completely ignoring it or like standing and not knowing what to say. So you can always say, oh yeah, I see what you mean. I will address this question, or I'll address this concern in my revisions. So
you can also have
that will be okay.
Have some fun with it. You have 2 drinks by you, and one could say a label on it said, for profound questions, have a drink here. You say, I'm going to my profound and see if I get an answer. You can make some fun, but I like Maria's answer better. But also have a pen with you and write it down on a slip. Have a blank sheet of paper in front of you and write it down. Make it look like you're taking it seriously. That might my other notion might be unseriously. So you want to take it seriously, and then you say, "Oh, thank you for that suggestion or that idea. I hadn't totally thought about that, or some way of stating it." And when you answer any question, start with the person who asked it and then pan to the rest of the audience. Okay, don't just talk to the person who asked the question. Don't let the other committee members feel like they're not important. Or in IST, in our department, we often have rooms full of students, there. So you want to make sure everyone feels welcome to your dissertation or a part of your dissertation. You don't want to pay homage to the slides. You don't want to just have eye contact with the person who asked the question, although you should start with that and end with that person. But in between, you should be panning around, but not nervously, just authoritatively panning around and making they all will think you are the expert. You know what you're doing. Even while you're making half of the answer up, it's best to have a little bit, not too much of a mood, but have some sense of space in the room. Chaoran, I see you wanted to answer that. What else?
No, I totally agree with you. And that question also get me to think how we should defend our dissertation, right? And how much do we defend? If, for instance, in that case, I might never thought about that. And if it is really good suggestion, I will say that I will appreciate that. But if I think that that's something I exclude on purpose, I will also try to justify why I didn't include that. And but on the other hand, you appreciate the faculty member and say yes, this is a great suggestion, and that's why I didn't include that. So
And you do,
in that way, you both recognize it and also you defend yourself.
you do give them
Yeah.
a revisionary table back to them, and so they see what you changed. And you track your changes. Maybe you yellow highlight the changes. It's much easier than reading track changes. Or you have two versions. You let them decide which one they want to see. And most time, only your advisor sees it. I often, when I'm on a committee, even if I'm not the advisor, I want to see the final document with track change. I'd rather see a yellow highlighted changes. Then I feel complete. I feel like I really get a sense that they've finished their dissertation. I don't feel like they've finished it until they're actually done with it. You know, not that I want to push them hard. I just feel like there's no sense of completion until I see that document. Maria?
Yeah, and Dr. Wang mentioned that if you excluded something on purpose, you can explain that, but also explain that in your paper. And if you can't do it in advance, so that will avoid any questions about this matter. So if you didn't include this in advance, that's okay too. You can address that in your revisions just on your own. So just to make sure you can address this issue. So you want to make like your defense as safe as possible by including as many citations for things that you did. So that will avoid any additional upcoming questions. So you just do that and you protect yourself from that. And then maybe during your defense, you can talk, like Dr. Bonk said, about other plans for your dissertation. So instead of a committee picking on your methodology or on your literature review, so you make yourself a safe cushion by citing authors, by citing scholarly studies and all of this. So you want to not protect, but you want to cover every aspect of your dissertation, including your methodology, including your conceptual framework, and including your actual research.
Right. And so Chaoran has a question here, is humor okay? And, you know, intermittent humor is okay. You know, a couple jokes, maybe one joke during the delivery of your, and then maybe one or two in answers, but don't have 10 jokes embedded in your presentation. You know, I know Kim would try to throw in a couple. That's okay, Kim, but to put in more than just a couple in the defense might take it in the wrong direction. So and there's some spontaneous. So spontaneity is good, you know, and throwing something out there you hadn't thought about, you know, just, you know, everyone will laugh, and that's okay. Breaking the ice, or what is that called? You know, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Any last comments from any one of you, or any last concern? Anything? Anyone want to say goodbye to Chaoran and Maria? And to unmute your microphones, because they're going to go shortly. Isha?
No, just gonna say thank you. It was so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
And Megan, we haven't heard
you.
from you. I had her in class last night. Megan? She's got kids around her, maybe.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, no, I've just been listening in. So thank you for coming.
She's been watching the World Series. No, they're not started yet.
No, not yet. About
Sune?
20 more minutes.
Sune?
Oh, yes.
Anything you want to say?
Oh, no, just everything is really helpful for me. So I just focus on listening and write down. That's because I'm, working on collecting data. So that was really helpful. And
So
then, can I ask you one more thing? Actually, it's not related to the defense, just to, I'm concerned with the result of the data collection. So what if the result is not expected? Actually, I thought that maybe the result will be that way, but actual result is the vice versa, something like the negative, for example.
Yeah, I know.
So what should you do?
So you inform your committee members as you go along. If you've collected data that's that's different from your research questions, or that challenge those questions, tell your committee members as you're writing up that, here's an update to my dissertation project, and I'm at the dissertation write-up phase. Don't throw it on at the very end. let them know, as you're starting to write it up, because then you've already informed them, and they're not going to have any problems when it comes time to defense. You don't want to throw any surprises or huge surprises at people. So a huge surprise. Then first start with your advisor. Start with yourself and reflect on it, and then start with your advisor and so forth, and then your committee members, and that's the way I would go about it. And you'll be fine. People will enjoy that. They enjoy seeing something that wasn't patented, that's not so step by step or that's expected. There's some curiosity that you'll provoke from having something unusual in your findings. And I'll appreciate it. So next week, I'm going to take a 5-minute break, but I want to tell you who's coming next week. We have Susie Gronseth, who works down at the University of Houston, where one of our guests is Karen is down there. So Susie is an outstanding alum. Last year, she got outstanding alum in the School of Ed. And she also is the Senate president at the University of Houston. She's the first clinical professor to be president of the Faculty Senate. So I'm very proud of her. And she wrote a book on UDL, Universal Design for Learning. But she's not going to talk about UDL. She's going to talk about how to set up for writing spaces to be successful. And she's coming with Tiffany Roman, another doc student from about 15 years ago. And Tiffany's at Kennesaw State and is going up for tenure early, which indicates both these people have had early career successes. And both were at AECT last week in Las Vegas, and I was hanging out with them at least one afternoon. So I know they're going to look forward to being here. They've come before. It'll be a real informative session with both of them. They're great instructors and great people, both of them. And just like tonight, Maria and Chaoran, you've answered a lot of questions. And you let me talk a little bit too. So no, I hope I didn't talk too much. But thank you, Maria, and thank you, Chaoran. You guys were great. And I teach this class again next semester, so maybe I'll talk to you about it. Let's take a 5-minute break, and I'm going to stop the recording here and stop the recording. Yes.